Order. Tony Vaughan to move the motion.
Thank you, Chair. It is a privilege to serve under your chairship. I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 751174 calling for the appointment of a maternity commissioner to improve maternity care for mothers and babies. I first want to thank the two petitioners, Louise Thompson and Theo Clark, two formidable women and campaigners who have raised this issue relentlessly over several years, and they've done so powerfully alongside many others, including the Birth Trauma Association, MASIC, Make Birth Better, the Maternal Mental Health Alliance, 5 Times More, and Mumsnet. And I also want to thank the 153,000 people who quickly signed Louise and Theo's petition after it was launched, including 203 in my own constituency of Folkestone Hythe and Romney Marsh. Sir Alec, we should remember that most births in the UK are safe. I acknowledge and thank the frontline NHS midwives, nurses and doctors and all across the health service who every day do outstanding work to care for mothers and babies across our nation. At the same time, there are clear, deep-rooted and long-standing problems in our maternity and neonatal services, and I just want to raise 4 statistics on that. The first is that UK maternal death rates are one of the highest in Western Europe, and stillbirth rates are high. 2, in that context, the NHS currently spends more on payouts for medical negligence than on the entire frontline maternity service budget, which is money that should be going into frontline care and safer care, not litigation. 3, according to the Care Quality Commission's latest national review of maternity services, covering inspections between 2022 and 2023, almost half of the maternity units it inspected were rated requires improvement or inadequate, and only 4% were rated outstanding. 4th, over the past 2 decades, we've seen a heartbreaking succession of maternity scandals across Morecambe Bay, Shrewsbury and Telford, East Kent, which is serving my constituency, and now Nottingham. The patterns are the same. Women raised concerns, said something was wrong, that they were in pain or frightened, and they were not then listened to. A failure of listening runs through every major maternity report of the last decade, alongside often unsafe care, a toxic culture, and weak oversight, which are reflected in, I think, around 750 recommendations in those various reports. Unfortunately, those were the experiences of the petitioner, Louise Thompson, who was denied a C-section despite advocating for one, resulting in a massive obstetric hemorrhage. My constituent Jo Page also experienced these systemic failures. Her son was born at William Harvey Hospital in Ashford some years ago. A birthing injury was misdiagnosed and she didn't receive the treatment she ought to have received for what was in fact a 4th-degree tear, and she did not receive the right support. And as a result, she's suffered years of pain, indignity, and cannot stand for long periods and needs to use the toilet frequently. As a result, she has had to give up her career, cannot do normal things like taking a flight just to go on holiday, and her life has been utterly changed. Now, she works now with MASIC, Mothers with Anal Sphincter Injuries, running a support group for local women in Folkestone and Hythe and the wider Kent area. And she also trains midwives and doctors in correctly diagnosing tears, and was recently involved in a Sky News film, The Women Who Weren't Listened To, which tells the traumatic stories of 3 mothers cared for in NHS England hospitals. I wanted to say to Jo that you are truly inspiring, and I know the whole House would express their thanks for all the work that you are doing for women up and down the country. I spoke to Jo last week, and she told me that she continues to receive messages even now from women who have experienced misdiagnosis and not feeling listened to in their birthing experiences. These included a police officer and a social worker who, in their individual cases, had been so badly injured during birth that they had to give up their careers, have got into debt and have suffered immeasurably. And I'm sad to say that a constituent contacted me just last month who experienced the very same failings they had read about in the Kirkup report on William Harvey's maternity services. When I spoke to the petitioner Louise Thompson last week, she said she is constantly hearing from women with postpartum physical injuries, mental health issues, and know people who have committed suicide following maternity service and postpartum system failures. She also spoke of the profound strain on partners who must simultaneously support a recovering mother, assist in caring for a newborn, and continue work all at the same time. She pointed out that a third of women experience birth as traumatic and 4 to 5% develop post-traumatic stress disorder every year, which is around 30,000 women in the UK. And the impact of trauma can last a lifetime, affecting a mother's bond with her baby, relationship with her partner, her ability to work, and her long-term mental health. So Alec, why is this happening? The petitioners believe that one key reason is a lack of unified leadership and consistency across maternal care in the UK, which is long-standing and has been that way for many years. When the petitioner Theo Clark was the Honourable Member for Stafford, she chaired the first ever birth trauma inquiry with the Honourable Member for Canterbury, who heard from 1,300 patients, including those from marginalised communities and professionals, about their experiences of maternity services across the 4 nations of the UK. And that inquiry was prompted by Theo Clark's own traumatic birth experience, which he bravely and publicly spoke about in the House of Commons, describing it as the most terrifying experience of her life. In submissions to that inquiry, mothers reported being mocked or shouted at, being denied the most basic assistance, such as pain relief, and left feeling terrified, humiliated and ashamed, and the word broken appeared more than any other. The inquiry's May 2024 report was called Listen to Mums, Ending the Postcode Lottery on Perinatal Care, and its 14 recommendations were headed by a call on the UK government to publish a national maternity improvement strategy led by a new maternity commissioner reporting to the Prime Minister. The petitioners believe that these measures would fill in a void. Yes.
Thank you. I'm most grateful to my Honourable Friend for giving way and also for calling this important debate. And I should also say I'm very grateful to my constituent, Louise Thompson, for having the guts and the decency to parlay what was an absolutely horrible experience for her into a determination to make lives better for women across this country and to improve maternity services for everybody. And I'm very grateful for what she's doing, and that she's here today. I'll very much welcome that. I also, I'm a member, as my friend may be aware, of the Health Select Committee, and we did recently a report on black maternal health, and much of the things you've described came out in that committee. There is a huge amount to be done. As regards making the changes and then making them stick, I very much support his support for having a National Maternity Commissioner to drive this through. But does he have any thoughts that if the government isn't minded to appoint a Maternity Commissioner, how else do you think we might get the drive and the determination to make the changes stick right across government for all time?
Tony Vaughan.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his intervention and repeat and echo his comments about the petitioner Louise Thompson and her advocacy on this issue. I think the petitioner's analysis is that, as I'm going on to say, is that there has been a vacuum of leadership and accountability across the system here. And I know that the government, and we'll hear more from the Minister later, is looking into how best to do that. Certainly, whatever happens, there has to be a structural way of providing that leadership and avoiding the fragmentation and different interpretations of different guidance documents across the system. So there is a very clear systemic change that cures this, because it is a problem that has been ongoing for very many years, and it isn't something which so far an answer has been put forward. But the petitioner Theo Clark told me that an obstetrician in London, and this illustrates the point about perhaps the postcode lottery aspect of this, and this is a very strong belief that the petitioners have, that we need these measures to create expert national leadership and tighten up rules to avoid a postcode lottery. She told me that an obstetrician in London that she spoke to recently told her there are 87 different pieces of guidance which apply in maternity care. And really this doesn't sound like a framework. I think for many people it looks like a kind of disparate number of different documents which really creates a variation in interpretation between different areas. And Theo Clark's strong view is that leaves a room for interpretation that results in different approaches to care in different areas. And this means that in very practical terms, something as very concrete as training midwives on recognising and treating birthing injuries varies hugely between different areas. And I spoke a moment ago about my constituent who trains midwives on this issue. That training isn't available everywhere, and certainly not in the same way that it's delivered by Mason. Yes.
Just Fuller.
The honourable gentleman for giving way, and he's making a really important point about disparity around guidance. I think it's believed that if you have somebody at the top of an NHS trust who's passionate about maternity care, it's more likely to trickle down, but that's not the same in every trust, and therefore you end up with a postcode lottery. In my area of Chichester, mothers going to give birth would have a totally different experience if they went to Chichester, Guildford and Portsmouth, because they're three totally different trusts with totally different guidance, with totally different rules around when mothers should present or the sort of treatment that they would get when they get to hospital. So does he agree with me that introducing a maternity commissioner would mean that we'd have that strategic oversight across the country as to how the experiences that mothers should expect to have?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention. I mean, certainly the petitioner's view is very clear that without that expert oversight, and expert and national level oversight, that there's no way of turning that kind of thicket of different guidance, different frameworks into a sort of coherent, enforceable standard of care. And whatever structural change the government puts forward, it has to do that job. And certainly I spoke to this constituent, Jo Page, earlier, and she was telling me that there are people in Folkestone and Hythe who are going to Tunbridge Wells to access maternity services because of the concerns that they have about the local standards of care. So that obviously has to be fundamentally addressed. Sir Alec, the powerful evidence from the various maternity investigations we have seen show that when everyone is responsible, nobody is accountable. And certainly appointing a maternity commissioner could well mean that there is somebody with whom the buck stops, a dedicated expert responsible for turning 750 recommendations or the 87 guidance documents into a single national maternity strategy and to ensure it's implemented. Now, that's not to say that that's the only way that that could be done. Baroness Amos is shortly publishing her report on the national maternity and neonatal investigations in NHS services. The petitioners strongly believe that her report should commit to a maternity commissioner and maternity strategy. And I look forward to hearing from the Minister about how the government currently views that particular proposal. I would also ask the Minister to commit to providing an update on which of the recommendations that have previously been committed to may well be taken forward. But in conclusion, Sir Alec, the government's recent decision to introduce a women's health strategy is hugely welcome and is an important acceptance that women's health has been neglected for far too long. The petitioners strongly believe that it would make a real difference to women giving birth today if that strategy encompassed a maternity commissioner with the authority, expertise and focus to end the postcode lottery in maternity care and break the cycle of avoidable harm once and for all.